Hi there, it's Joey John McGuire again, still at Hollybush House. And if you've read the story so far, you'll realise that I am in the process of reciting my autobiography, The Making of McGuire. Chapter 5, Gibson's Holiday Camp. I keep forgetting to make sure I've done the volume. Here we go then. Chapter 5, Gibson's Holiday Camp. As if by some magnetic force, Joey was drawn back to Gibson's, an old haunt from his college days, a sort of pleasure dome where he knew he would find work, excitement, and most of all, women. He had his first sexual experience at the tender age of 11, and had never been able to control his lusts and desires since that day. In fact, his 4 months in Ireland had been the longest spell of abstinence for a long time, leaving his balls feeling as though they were hanging to his knees with the weight of their contents. He had thought then, God knows what he'd do if he was ever incarcerated. Joey had already established himself a name in battalion as a womanizer, and was often cheered by all, as more often than not he was late on parade, looking dishevelled from the events of previous nights. On entering the camp, his eyes searched the swimming pool area. He was looking for his old mate, Bill Dance, a bronzed Adonis who had taken Joey under his wing and taught him the art of seduction, or maybe entrapment would be a more fitting way to describe it. Sure enough, Bill was there, in his normal pose, women hovering like flies round shit. He just knew the moment he spotted him that they would have a great time, and Joey felt the ache inside that he knew only the pleasures of a woman's flesh would console. Joey had previously done every job on the camp, so he knew all the angles. Those he hadn't learned himself, Bill was responsible for in the main. The place to work was most definitely the swimming pool, and that was the job he had gone there to do. There would be many happy women over the next 6 weeks, but he remembered there were a few who went home in tears. Joey remembered the importance of this visit, to eliminate from his mind the pain and tortures of Ireland by indulging in self-pleasure, which he most certainly had done. The public waiting room of the Criminal Injuries Board was not really the place to reminisce his sexual exploits at the camp, and he was aware of the stirring in his loins being triggered by all the pleasurable recollections. He contented himself with the memories of how the two partners in crime had snared their prey instead. He suddenly became aware of the fact that it had been weeks since a single sexual thought had crossed his mind. It was just too easy, he had thought to himself. On Wednesdays, an old man used to walk around the chalets with a list, planning the sleeping arrangements for the new intake on Saturdays. Bill had long since bribed him for access to this most important piece of information, and every week the highlight of a Wednesday was sifting through the columns of names and looking for future conquests. There were a few basic rules to observe to avoid disappointing time wasting, and to ensure maintain a distinct advantage on all the other red-blooded male members of staff. They checked carefully that the victims were staying no longer than a week. Then they'd look for a miss in a chalet on her own, or two misses together, or even a missus on her own, or with a female friend. It was quite important to check that there were no husbands in the chalets next door, and the only hard task was deciphering possible boyfriends. If the girls were under 18, their age would be printed by the side of their names. They were very aware of the penalties for juvenile rape. Joey recalled writing down the names and chalet numbers of at least a dozen women, but Bill had been at the game so long could do it all from memory. They had often laughed at this point. Every Saturday they would volunteer for reception duties and would turn up wearing huge, inviting smiles, red coats which implied authority, and the most amazing tans, especially Bill. They would be the life and soul of reception, constantly joking with both young and old, fussing the afflicted from blind to paraplegic to mentally challenged, but all the time watching and listening for a stunning beauty of their dreams to relate to the receptionist the number of a familiar chalet on their lists. It would be imperative to escort these women to their respective chalets, and they knew just the right things to say, never pushy, always polite, and on the surface utterly charming. After a hard day's work laying the bait, they would disappear from camp for the evening, leaving the intended prey searching in the lounge and bar all night, and the male vultures on the staff to try too early and be rejected. Joey had never really understood why it always worked so well, but the proof was always there on Sundays at the pool. The women they worked on were by then drooling at the mouth, ready and willing, totally unaware that they had been hooked by two of the best anglers in the business. Staff accommodation was disgusting, but they even had an answer to that. Joey had worked on the maintenance crew previously and had acquired the pass keys to every chalet on the camp, including 5-star accommodation. If a punter had not turned up by 7 p.m. on Saturday, they generally would not turn up at all. Joey would chat to the receptionist every Saturday evening, all the time noting which chalet keys were still hanging on the board behind her. He made a point never to screw her, just to keep her interested enough so that she would never suspect what was going on. Joey smiled to himself, for he had fond memories that by Sunday night he'd be bonking and pleasing at least 2 young ladies, and more if he could muster the time and energy. It hadn't taken long for Joey to forget the army and at least pigeonhole his experiences in Northern Ireland. But when it was time to leave, he found it very hard. The army was restricting him of his independence and free spirit, robbing him of his youth, pushing him to the limits of his own personal endurance, scaring the very life out of him. He contemplated AWOL, absence without leave, but he knew it would be a futile act, and so his days at the Pleasure Dome were over for then, and he had reluctantly returned to barracks.